Hello, I'm Sarah Barrett Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center, and today I'm in conversation with this guy in the plaid shirt, Leelanau County artist Mark Mehaffey, whose work is now in the Arts Center's lobby gallery, and that's called Random Collages from the Scrap Pile. Hi, Mark.
Hi, good morning.
Random is an exhibit of collages, but, and let me see if I can't screen share so we can talk about something directly.
And I have three with me that I can also hold up.
All right, there we go. Um,
Ah,
Random is an exhibit of collages, but these collages depart from the way many people have been trained to think about collage, like torn pictures out of magazines, words. This is a totally different approach to it. So explain the series and talk a little bit about the light bulb that went on in your head that began the process of creating these.
sure. I'm a painter.
Mm-hmm.
I love my paintbrushes. Last time I counted, there were between 400 and 500 paintbrushes in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do. And during the process of creating this series of paintings, it was necessary for me to trim some of them. And this was 7 years ago. And so I would trim on my paper cutter, and then get back to work and trim, throw the trimmings away and get back to work. And one day the light bulb did go on, and the trimmings laid there next to the paper cutter. And I thought that they were sort of intrinsically interesting. I like the random, based on the laws of physics and the power of the cutter as I used it, the random design, if you will, of the cuttings. And so I picked them up, and this is a rather complicated one, and they had to be glued down in order. So I want you to think about the process here. Those cuttings which are underneath had to be glued down first. So what I did, and this is a huge amount of work that I set forth for myself, but it was fun. I took a photograph of the cuttings as they lay next to the paper cutter, deconstructed them piece by piece by piece, and then glued them back down in the exact order and position they were in when they fell from the paper cutter.
Are you a glue stick guy or a yes paste
I'm
guy or?
I'm a matte medium guy.
Okay.
So I'm using acrylic matte medium as my glue. And some of these were water media, resoluble watercolor and gouache on paper, which means not only did I have to glue them back down in the order, I had to take them outside and spray varnish them to seal the water media into each
Yikes.
individual piece. So when I put matte medium on them, it didn't smear the paint.
So there's going to be some wiseacre who says it's a lot of time. Why do you want to do it? Blah, de, blah. How do you respond to that?
I get to do what I want. I'm the artist. I saw artwork in scraps laying next to the paper cutter. I chose to do them for myself. It took a lot of time and effort, and I enjoyed the process. And I really don't care what Wiseacre says.
This is truly an inventive reuse of existing materials. Um, it made me wonder how fine-tuned your radar is for using existing materials in your other work, which is primarily that of painting in all sorts of water media, although you are a guy who doesn't get siloed much. But let's just go back to the painting end of your practice and the reuse, the possibilities for reuse that may or may not enter that.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with another artist this morning about reusing materials, paintings actually. So
Hmm.
every painting that I do is not successful. I'm the one that gets to determine that. And sometimes paintings that I truly like, other people don't. And again, that doesn't bother me too much because if I like it, I'm the primary audience for that work. And sometimes I'll do a painting and it just doesn't work. It does not work. And so I paint over it. And then I do another painting and that doesn't work either. And I paint over it. And so I just had a conversation with another artist. I have a couple panels that I'm working on that are 4 paintings deep because
Wow.
I would do a painting and it just didn't satisfy what I was after. Others may like it, but I didn't. So I'm the one that gets to decide. So I have a number of panels which are very textural and lend themselves to me doing the final painting with a palette knife, which is also very textural use of paint. And so the process of rejection and the process of reuse leads to something different, something new, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
That also gives one pause for thought about the whole process of doing well, in the painting world, the underpainting that lots of people start their canvas with. Do any of those things that you've painted over migrate through at all?
Yeah. So the Italians have a terminology, a term that covers that exactly. It's called pentimento.
Hmm.
Pentimento literally means showing the history of a painting within that painting.
Hmm.
So I'm the one that gets to decide when I'm working how much I cover, what I cover, a lot, a little, how much shows through the finished work, and on and on. So let's say, for example, I trash a painting, it just doesn't work, and I
Hmm.
to paint over it. All of that paint application from the first painting does show through the textures.
Hmm.
So that's the pentimento part. There's other paintings. I have a 48 by 48 upstairs that's now 8, 9, 10 years long, and I do 1 or 2 layers every year. And I'm working my way towards the middle. And each time I do that, I let a little of the previous layer show through. And the
Hmm.
hard part is what do I cover? What do I let show? What do I
Hmm.
cover? Show.
Hmm.
It's just a process. My brain is overactive in terms of what I do. So sometimes as I'm working, I get an idea for something else, like the paper cutter collages. I'm still doing some of those, just not as often. I did a bunch of them 7 years ago, and now I do one every so often, only when I see something beside the paper cutter that is engaging to me. And then they morphed. So now, first I picked them up and I put them down exactly as they fell.
Hmm.
I'm looking at a bunch of these. I'm going, I think I can do something to some of these. So some of them I manipulated a little bit. Couldn't help myself. I'm the maker. So, oh, this would look better if there was just a little red rectangle right there. So I would do that. So
It,
there,
would you import a red rectangle from another pile of paper or another
yeah.
box?
Yes, my
Hmm.
collage collection is huge. It's a tub this big, plus it's overflowing into other spaces. It's just I don't show collages very often. I love them. I do them. I collect stuff to assemble, and then
Hmm.
I just end up painting most of the time. But where was I? Okay, then back to the randomness. So random really isn't random because of gravity and the specific weight of each material and the amount of effort I use when I cut them, and that can all be mathematically combined. So that randomness really wasn't. And I looked at some of these arrangements and I think, well, maybe I can improve on this arrangement. So a few, not that many, but some I added to.
Hmm.
And then it got to the point where, oh, well, this is fun. Then I'm not even using the randomness of the paper cutter. I'm just collaging.
Hmm.
And so I brought 3 examples. May I hold them up?
Sure, let's try it.
All right. So This one is completely random. This is how it fell from my paper cutter.
Exactly.
Exactly. I
Hmm.
picked each piece up, took a photograph of it, and glued it back down in the exact way it fell from my paper cutter. Okay.
Hmm.
This one was mildly manipulated.
And there was an interesting decision. Oh, there's the red.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all I had. Everything else was as it fell from the paper cutter.
But I'm interested that your elements go off the boundary of the substrate, that
Yeah,
they go off into space there a little bit.
and quite a few of them had to keep going, um, on to infinity, maybe even, because some of the cuttings were quite large,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really want to use the whole foam core for that, so I kept them all to a fairly small shape. And I like the fact that sometimes they go off, and it just depended on the size of the trimming.
Well, I'm not done with bring that guy back. Okay. The red dot is an interesting decision that's not random, but very conscious. Um, it, it's small, but it just has so much presence.
Well, yeah, for any number of reasons. One, it's isolated, and
Mm-hmm.
so we always go to the isolation. It's the smallest shape in the composition.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you surround small shapes with larger shapes, the viewer always goes to the smaller shapes. In addition to that, it's the only saturated color in the whole piece. Everything else is a neutral. And so we have that contrast between saturated color and neutral color. So all of those were conscious decisions to manipulate that which was random, and you can
Mm-hmm.
put a question mark after that, um, um, initially. And so some of the display at the Glen Arbor Arts Center some of the collages will be mildly manipulated, not greatly, but some. And then some will be just as they fell from the paper cutter, and I would invite the viewer to try to decide. In addition,
Yes.
there'll be not very many, but some which have very little to do with the paper cutter. So this one probably here and here as it fell from the paper cutter, but then I decided I'm just going to collage. So this is part of an old watercolor painting. And
Mm-hmm.
these are pieces from older paintings. And so this one was greatly manipulated by me consciously.
Well, sounds like a lovely place to begin. It's a lovely starting point.
Yeah, and so it precipitated conversations with a whole bunch of other artists about is our universe ever truly random? Is what we see out there random, or was everything that we believe and see manipulated somehow? So, and then that flowed right into a discussion about religion, which we're not going to get into here. But yes, yeah, it was kind of a fun conversation starter with my friends that are also artists.
I'm going to march Mr. Wiseacre back into the conversation. Uh, so many times when people see work like the collages you've made in the random series, the Wiseacre guy will say, gee, my kid could do that.
Yeah.
Um, your collages are deceptively simple. And so how does one address a question like that in such a way to help people start making the bridge toward understanding what you're up to?
So many ways I could answer that, and we're being recorded. So let's put it this way: as those fell from the paper cutter,
Hmm.
I saw beauty, or maybe not beauty, but a certain wonderfulness in the arrangement. Now, part of that had to do with they're all cuttings from my paintings, and
Hmm.
so I kind of like the color arrangements of my original paintings in the first place, which means, of course, I'm going to like the color as they laid there. But I saw in that random with a question mark pattern something that intrigued me. And so if I saw that, maybe I thought if I shared that, others might see it also. And if they don't, then that's okay too. That's the wonderful thing about art, making stuff, is that not everybody's going to like everything we do. And that's
Mhm.
just fine. Yeah.
Random is also a great example of process. We could just talk about process the whole time here. So you are um, a veteran teacher in the public schools, teaching visual art to a whole range of kids and adults. What, in terms of process, the random pieces are about letting go, pulling back from that impulse to control things, to control the outcome. What, as a teacher, and from your own practice, do you tell students about the process of letting things be random, letting go, just seeing what happens?
So, especially when I taught younger kids, and I just had my three grandnephews to my studio. So we're talking 7, 10, and 12. Um, and they were just up in my studio, and I just give them prompts and materials, and they go nuts. Um, and so the process to kids is the fun part, right? And if you put too many parameters about the product, then they become a little inhibited, especially the older they get. And so I always put the emphasis on let us just enjoy this process and see what happens. Of course, with them, I fed them chocolate in between also. And you know, I did the same thing in high school. I may show a painting somewhere else that's a huge painting of atomic fireball jawbreakers, and just atomic fireball jawbreakers and their wrappers. And when I taught high school, the kids would be working right along, but as we got closer to the end, they would chat quite a bit. And so as the class walked in, I would give every kid an atomic fireball.
Mhm.
It took an hour if they kept it in their mouth to consume, and I would get a 1 hour of peace and quiet, and they would get a concentrated hour of work in. And so that always my emphasis was on, okay, let's validate what you're up to as long as you're serious about it.
Mhm.
Even though yours is substantially different than theirs, and theirs is substantially different from everybody else's, because that's the cool thing about art, the differences that we have.
I think it's so interesting that you differentiated between the process and the product, and how younger kids are totally geeked about the process. But the older human beings become, the more constrained they become by worrying about the product, the end result. There's so much to be said about process, but why is it important?
um, you know, one leads to the other or not. There's a number of artists out wide world view that create and never show anybody anything. And so they do it because they truly enjoy working, and they're not worried about the product. I like to pay bills and keep even with my artistic habit. And so some of the work I do is universal enough that people enjoy it. And so when they enjoy it, sometimes they buy it. And so occasionally, you know, even though I enjoy all the processes that I work in, sometimes some of those processes are directed towards the end product. And I try to make that as enjoyable for myself and as enjoyable for the viewer as I possibly can. Other compartments, other ways I work, I'm only into the process, or I'm self-feeding a need within myself, and the end product is not very universal. It may be even off-putting, but it's something that I have to get out, and I'm certainly not worried about the end product there, only insofar as it satisfies something within me. And I'm not worried about what anybody thinks about it.
Um, the way you're discussing this might cause one to think that product and process are in opposition to one another.
Yeah, not really. Uh, Ultimately, uh, we need to enjoy our process. So through the years, what I've done is created for myself like a bazillion different processes, and so my brain fires. And as I'm working on this series of paintings, uh, an idea occurs to me,
Mhm.
which may be a really cool idea, and the only way to tell is to follow that path for a while. And sometimes that tangent leads to a breakthrough, which helps all the other stuff that I do. And sometimes that path leads to a dead end. It was still worth following that path, even if it leads to a dead end, because I set it up so that I enjoy all of the process. Even if that means picking up 38 pieces of material next to my paper cutter, taking a photograph, and then very painstakingly gluing each 38 pieces down in order.
I adore it. It concentrates the mind, doesn't it?
It does, yes, my overactive imagination. Yes, absolutely.
You referred to a painting, Atomic Fireballs, and I want to let the people know who are watching this that you can see a picture of Atomic Fireballs on the Creativity Q&A interview Mark and I did back in 2022, and that'll be linked on this page, as well as a variety of other ways to see Mark's work. Random, the exhibition, is going to live in the lobby gallery through August 28th. And this particular exhibition is a fundraiser. Mark, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, one of my compartments, very enjoyable compartment, is painting in plein air. And I enjoy the challenge of seeing our three-dimensional world and translating it onto a two-dimensional flat surface. I'm also an outdoorsman, and I really enjoy being outdoors. So plein air painting is like a fun, I used to call it a smaller compartment. Now it's more important since I moved up north,
Mhm.
because I just like to be outdoors. And the Glen Arbor Paint Out is a fun activity, and the Glen Arbor Arts Center is now going to, in conjunction, offer plein air painting for kids. And so I decided, well, let's focus any sales towards that endeavor, towards materials, towards hiring teachers, towards getting the kids involved in plein air painting.
Mhm.
So, and all the proceeds will go to the Glen Arbor Arts Center.
Well, we'll have more information about the kids' plein air project
Yeah,
on the website. Um, Thanks, Mark. This
yeah.
is always delight to talk with you. And I want to thank everyone who watched today. Thanks for watching, and see
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Thank you very much.